Record is going.
And here we go.
Here we go.
Folks, got Bill here with me, and I'm Cecil. We're here to talk about Bigfoot today. General introduction, of course, there's a lot of rhetoric about Bigfoot. There's a lot of folks that believe in him, and a lot of folks that say that we're nuts for thinking that there's a possibility even that he exists. And we're going to try to explore some of the evidence and some of the information that we gleaned over the few years that we've been interested. And with that in mind, we're just going to jump in. After we get going with the general introduction here, then we'll probably talk a little bit more about videos, because that's one of the big things that is contested, and some of the things that I have seen that personally convinced me that it must be something to it. So let's go for it, Bill. Tell me what you got.
Well, I've been fascinated for a long, long time. I grew up here in Ohio. But I spent a lot of my summer times in Tennessee. My family had a dairy farm, very remote area. I saw a lot of weird things. Never actually saw a Bigfoot. Heard some really strange things. My family down there would always say, it's a bobcat.
Yeah.
And I believed them until I heard a bobcat. That wasn't a bobcat that I heard.
Trust me, I've been there.
And tracks and just, things that the old timers would just push away, that if you put a little thought into it, you go, nah, that wasn't a raccoon. That wasn't a bear. That wasn't whatever it is you're saying. There's something more to that. Right. And I think living in the woods, living in the rural areas back then, they didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to provoke it. They want to bring it on. Yeah. It would damage their livestock, their livelihood.
I never really lived, born and raised here in Ohio, and lived in rural areas, but never really lived in the country, so to speak. Not like that. But a lot of my kinfolk are from Tennessee and Kentucky, and I spent some time down there. And with that in mind, just in those areas alone, now those areas are fairly populated, but still, we're talking like Jellicoe, Tennessee, Williamsburg, Kentucky area. And even there, it's like things could hide there that you would never see.
Oh, for sure.
They used to raise hogs, my Pa Tig did, and he would set them free and let them just fatten up on their own. Then he would go hunting for his own hogs. And it would take a long time to find the darn things.
They turn feral very fast.
Yes, they do. Yeah. And they get pretty cranky, too. And so with that in mind, as difficult as it is to find a hog in the wild, and you know what that is, you know what it looks like, you know where it goes and how it eats and things like that. Something like a Bigfoot that has intelligence, supposedly, and can hide and is definitely not interested in being seen by humans, why couldn't it hide? So starting from there, I watched a couple of videos this morning yet, and in one of them, it showed a picture of a tree and a gap in a tree, and a figure in that gap. Now, it was almost like photoshopped, but it looked kind of like a gorilla, and larger forearms than what I would have expected to see on the Bigfoot. So I'm suspecting that that's what that was. Someone photoshopped that into that. But then there is this other video that I saw just day before yesterday, where a guy was shooting in the woods in Michigan, shooting film. He just happened onto this creature, and he saw it ripping chunks of an old tree apart. And first thing you think of, oh, that's a bear ripping a tree trunk apart, because they do that commonly. But the tree was still standing, and the creature was in a crouched position, and it had a large crown on its head, as a cone-shaped protrusion on its head. So I'm looking at the video and watching it as this guy films it, and you could see visible shoulders on this thing, and from the back, squatted down, to me, it looked like a gorilla, and it was definitely not photoshopped. So here's the thing just ripping things out and getting these grubs or whatever it was he was getting out of there, and then it stood up. And this sucker was about 9 foot tall. And I'm like, holy smoke. And the guy that was taking the film panicked and ran. Well, some of the comments below says, well, obviously it was fake. The guy conveniently panicked and ran as soon as it stood up. So I'm saying, okay, let's see you face a 9 or 10 foot creature in the wild and stand there nice and cool and calm and not get panicked. So you can't judge just because he panicked.
You can't. And I mean, to be honest with you, if I woke up on Christmas morning and saw Santa Claus in my living room, I would panic as well.
So would I.
You know, people forget that it's easy to armchair quarterback from home when you're looking at this evidence on it's photoshopped. Oh, this is fake. When it comes to video, yeah, of course, we've got so much, CGI.
Yeah,
you can make about anything until you break it down.
Right.
Things like the Patterson-Gimlin footage, of course, everybody knows the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Of course, it's not CGI, it's not fake. Until you put a man in a suit with markers and you try to make him walk that way, and it can't happen because the proportions are different. So it's real easy to rule it out until you break it down scientifically. And of course, there's the two schools of thought. There's the Jeff Meldrum who says, yeah, a person can't do that. And then there's other people that just say, yeah, they can, but I'm not going to show you evidence. It's not worth my time. Right.
And that's another one of my super frustrations. I was talking to my girlfriend this morning about it. And I read an article, and it's like, okay, is Bigfoot question has been answered. And then they start off by, the headline is, the assumption is it's been answered, but the body of the information says that these are probably bears, probably this, maybe that, never definitively. And yes, some of them videos are bears. Okay,
yep,
there's no question about some of them are bears. I've seen some. And I questioned the ones that BFRO showed, the Bigfoot Research Organization. They have stated some that they said they believed was Bigfoot, and I said, well, it looks more like a bear to me.
Yeah.
But on the video that I was talking about a little while ago, this thing had a cone-shaped head. And daggone if I didn't forget where I was going with that.
Well, I know that played a factor when they recreated, I don't mean to go back to the Patterson-Gimlin, but the cone on the head, you couldn't have that with the guy in a mask. The proportions don't work.
Fairly, honestly, that can be doctored up to make it look good. Mm-hmm. All right, and there was some question I had about the film, about the thing turning around and looking at the guys filming them. But at the same time, I agree with you that what are the odds of someone going to a place in the woods and presenting themselves either with a footprint or a suit at the right time for a stranger to come in and accidentally catch them.
Right.
Odds are pretty slim.
And these aren't neighborhood trails we're talking. These are remote
Yes,
areas.
very, very remote. And the point I lost a moment ago in my conversation was about the cone shape on the gorilla-looking thing that just stood up, and it was like 9 feet, maybe even 10 feet tall. But however tall it was very tall, and it had cone-shaped head. And now this was not a costume. You could see the proportions didn't work for a human at all. Nothing remotely similar to human, except it had arms and legs and a head. And people talk about these are bears. All right, so if you look at a bear's head looks like an overgrown dog's head.
Yeah.
It has a long nose and a sloping forehead, round forehead, low profile skull, and comes right off the neck and goes forward. Now, this creature here, from the neck went up, not forward, and went up and created a crown, and then had a short face, regardless if it was not a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, however you want to call him. It was not a bear, period.
Were
It
you
was
able to
just not
see
a
the
bear.
ears on that creature?
Just barely, and they were on the side of the head.
Yeah. Which is not going to be a
the
bear.
Top, not the top. Yeah. So there's some very interesting points, and then we have to take real quick. A lot of the videos are very fuzzy, and a lot of the tracks are obviously faked. We're going to go into tracks at another podcast.
Okay.
And then real quickly, I want to introduce another word, the Manitou. And I've read a lot of Western books and prehistoric novels, and they do a tremendous amount of research in these things, and they don't make up animals or critters or people. They use archaeological evidence.
That's a 10-cent word.
Yeah, today is a 40-cent word for me. But that's one of the words they used in here that they have taken from the Indian lore. Now, there's some called Sasquatch, some areas called Chippewa, I think, is something similar to that. And Manitou is another one. And it just depends on which tribe you're talking about and where they're at. And they have this blood-curdling scream, and they run through the woods, sometimes throwing things. And then, you got something like a 60-pound rock flying through the air 30 or 40 feet, all right? I'd like to see the guy that can pick up a rock in the woods or anywhere else, for that matter, and throw it 30 or 40 feet. Just throw it. Now, I mean, you got the shot putters with a 20-pounder, and they do the twirl and all that kind of stuff and get the momentum and throw it out to something like 60 feet. Yeah. But 60 pounds is a lot different.
Yeah.
And I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
I don't either.
There's just no way that there's any kind of other animal, nor human, is going to throw a rock 60 pounds. There's no other known animal in the continent of the United States or North America that can throw anything.
Yeah, I was going to say throw, period.
Yeah.
Apes,
Yeah, apes can, chimps and monkeys and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they can. And if there's a rumor of this one chimp being out loose from a wildlife reserve and a zoo of sorts, and got loose out in the west and stuff, and was purported to be living on its own in the wild and stuff. But during the period of time that these sightings took place, that chimp would have had to have been 43 years old.
Yeah, I was. That was California, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, and that was how they ruled it out, was this loss. I just read about this not long, maybe last week.
This morning for me.
And they said it was,
Yeah.
the age of it, even if it were alive, it wouldn't have the strength, the stamina, and the ability to do what they're seeing.
Right.
So kind of rules that one out.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the shows I've seen. Survivor Man.
Wes.
He's taken people like Obama and actors and all kinds of other people out and given them the wild experience of survival and doing crazy things, eating things that thanks, but I'll pass.
Yeah.
Unless I'm very hungry, and so forth. But one of the shows he did was about Bigfoot. And he has this friend, I can't think of the guy's name. He's fairly well known, but Tim something. And he is a avid Bigfoot believer. He says, I'm not a believer. I know it exists because I've encountered it. So either the man's a liar or Bigfoot's real. So
Are you referring to Todd Standing?
Yes.
Okay.
Todd Standing. I knew there was a T in there somewhere. And that's the bad part about me, is forgetting little details like people's names and things. But anyways, I've watched a number of his videos, Todd's, and then I watched this show where Todd was on with Survivor Man, Les Stroud. And the opening shot showed some branches, foliage, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, well, what's the point of this particular shot? And right about that time, the face came into focus. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, okay, that is one of the absolute most detailed costumes I've ever seen, or this is real. You could see the hair growing around its eyes and his face and growing in what I would call natural patterns, kind of like dogs and other critters do. When they have hair on their face, it grows a certain way, follows the contour of their face and all that stuff. It doesn't just stick out and things. And it had eyebrows, it had pupils. You could see the color of its eyes. It was sort of a honey brown, and the fur was a little bit more like a tan, but it was also not all one color. It had different shades to it.
Is this the one that blinks?
That might have been it.
Yeah, Todd has a few videos that are up close like that, and I know there's one where it blinks.
I saw that, but I'm just not sure if that's this one or not.
I've heard a lot of people, anybody that has good evidence gets a lot of flack for it, and Todd's one of those guys. I've heard a lot of people say that the blinking was like a Muppet type thing, but if you watch it really close, the eyes don't blink in sync. It's not like a close open like a puppet would blink. It looks very biological.
Very much so. Very much so.
And like you said, your 3 days hike from civilization, as Todd dragging this thing, 3 days out into the wilderness to take some pictures.
Right.
To what end?
Exactly. And unless, he threw some disclaimers out. He says, I am not a Bigfoot believer. I just hear so much about it. I want to go see if he's real or not.
Yeah.
And he never ever says it's real. Not one single time.
Les
did.
Yeah.
Never did say that. But he said he couldn't deny it either. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of videos. Matter of fact, I saw another one. There was a darker colored one it might have been the same clip and a different part of the clip. And you could see the face fairly well on that one too. But anyways, as I was looking at, you could see the eyes travel looking at things. Okay, and Muppets don't do that.
No.
You might get some of that effect, but this was just amazingly real.
Yeah.
And then I've seen clips. I can't identify where I saw them exactly, except, internet and TV, and where they're climbing up a hill. And now I want to tell you something. You were raised on the hills, and I was been in the hills, and we both know that you can't just scurry up a hill as a full-grown man and run up there very easily.
I don't care who you are.
You can do it, but it takes a lot of effort. Yeah. And these dudes were taking 5 and 6 foot strides going up the hill, and it's like, what kind of a man can do that? I don't know him. Now,
I don't want to know him.
Don't want to know him either. Now, I have to admit that when you start talking about distance of strides, I've heard a lot of controversy about that too. But when I was in the Marine Corps in 1968, I went to Camp Pendleton after boot camp. Went to ITR, Infantry Training Regiment, and Basic Infantry Training School. And during that period of time, I had a corporal that was in charge of me in our platoon, as platoon leader, and training us. This guy was about 5'8", maybe 5'9", and he looked like a spider. His body couldn't have been over 18 inches long, and the rest of him was all legs.
Wow.
It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Now, if you say, okay, well, it could have been somebody like that. Well, the problem with that is that when he walked, he looked like he had long, spindly legs that he had, and you could see that.
It was obvious.
Okay? It was quite obvious. None of these Bigfoot strides videos I've ever seen have ever looked like that at all.
Right.
In another video, they had a guy, they had a video of a proposed Bigfoot walking across the field, a rolling couple of hills. You've probably seen this. But they took a track runner and they stacked a camera on top of him and made him about 2 foot taller than what he was actually, so that they could get the film and get a perspective like the video was. And they marked out the trail that this thing took through the field, and they had him run through there to see if he could do it. And of course, he was able to accomplish that. Well, all right, that proves that a man can do some of the things that Bigfoot supposedly can do, but it doesn't prove anything about Bigfoot's existence or non-existence, because just because I can crawl around on all fours and bark and sound, I can actually bark and sound just like a dog, doesn't mean I'm a dog.
Doesn't make you a dog.
Yeah. So, the evidence that they're throwing out against it is sometimes nonsensical. Now, some of the evidence I saw, this was a TV show, something like Mountain Bigfoot Hunters or something like that. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen that one.
Oh, yeah.
That one guy that was all the time, well, and talking like this all the time and just rattling off nonsense. Mm-hmm. And that show kind of made me laugh. And they supposedly had one caged and all that kind of stuff, but they never got a good video of it and so forth. So I'm saying, okay, that was a hoax. Mm-hmm. All right, I don't buy that one at all.
Right.
But at the same time, you got some people that are saying, look, I don't want the publicity. I'm just telling you what I saw. And I don't care about what anybody else thinks.
That's the guy that I pay attention to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Typically, that's who I'm going to pay attention to.
Speaking of that exactly, who we pay attention to, going back to that Todd Standing, he gets a lot of bad rap. Some people even call him fraud standing. He did have a known hoax at one time, which kind of turned me off to a lot of his evidence until I heard his explanation. And he said he's in the back country. He finds these creatures. He tries to get them protected, and the government says, well, we can't protect something that's not there. Bring us proof, and then we'll protect it.
Yeah.
And he says, if I bring you the proof, you can't protect it. Once it's out there, you can't protect this.
Yeah.
And the government says, bring us proof, we'll protect it. So he made some proof to get the protection. Now, you can take that however you want. It makes sense to me. This guy's dumping his life savings into preserving something, and he's being made a fool of, and he keeps doing it.
Right.
He's not getting good publicity, so he's not doing it for fame or glory because it's not working.
Right.
It's just dragging his name through the mud. But this is also a guy that has very, very good evidence.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm going to keep doing it because I know what's there. I've seen it. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower.
Right.
So it's very interesting. You were talking about basically the burden of proof. If you're proving to someone that this thing is real, or if you're proving that it's not real, these guys that say, I'm not saying what it is, I'm just telling you what I saw.
Right.
That's the guy I want to pay attention to. And a lot of times those cases are pretty unexplainable.
Yeah.
Footprints that you can't fake some of them. Even when you put the fake, the little dermal ridges and the mid-tarsal breaks and all of the things, you can't fake a perfect footprint.
I was just about to talk about the dermal ridges when you made me think of it. Dr. Muldrum, Jeff Muldrum, is big-time investigator on this very thing.
Idaho State University.
Yes, and he has PhD. He's very astute and very knowledgeable, and he talks about these arches and heel prints and the ball, the footprints and the toe prints and different things. And then you have, in addition to that, we kind of shifting over into the topic we're going to cover later. But anyways, I saw a footprint that was rather large footprint, and it had kind of like a hammer toe on it. Now, why would anybody think to add a hammer toe onto a Bigfoot print?
Right.
If it wasn't real.
Right.
Yeah, they could, but would they?
Right.
That's
a lot of extra work to make your print look not as realistic.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, something about that just knocked my socks off. But going back to the films and videos, I seen them. I saw one where this bear comes down to the river from a bit of a slope coming down to the river, and a pretty good sized hill and small mountain maybe behind it. And he's coming around, he's sniffing around and basically just being a bear. And then all of a sudden, this bear, grizzly bear, not a black bear, okay, this grizzly bear,
Real bear.
a real one, panics and takes off running without any visual stimuli that you can see, without any audio stimuli that you can see. In other words, there were no shots, loud noises to scare him off, nothing to say boo and scare him off, and nobody standing there waving their arms to scare him off. Just all of a sudden he was gone. And then after he leaves, then you can see the partial outline of what looks like a Bigfoot in the foliage about 15, 20 feet from where he was standing.
Wow.
So
Grizzly's an apex predator. They don't just run for no reason.
Exactly. That one got my attention. And it's like, what in the world is going to scare a grizzly bear? I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
A little anecdote, saw on the joke line this morning, it's like, Forest Ranger says there's been a lot of bears around here, and there's a lot of bear attacks. So if you go out, be very cautious. Wear a bell so they can hear you coming, and they're not startled and so forth. And be sure to carry some pepper spray because they'll scare them off and all this kind of stuff. And then pay particular attention to the dung because you get a small pile, it's a black bear, and you get a large pile, and it's a grizzly bear. Now the small pile is going to have a lot of berries in it, and a large pile is going to smell like pepper. So it's like, you don't mess with a grizzly bear.
That's funny. I'm a nurse, and about 10 years ago, I was doing what's called clinicals. When you're still in nursing school, you go to facilities and kind of help out, and you learn. I was at a facility in Troy, and I met this fella, and we just clicked. We got along really well. This guy had extreme dementia, didn't remember me from one day to the next, didn't know his own family members, couldn't tell you what he had for lunch. He did have a great memory for things he did many years ago. He did a lot of work on cars. He could tell you, the motors he built, how he built it, the time of day that he built it, specs. He remembered that stuff, but couldn't tell you what month, year, day it was. So because we had this good rapport, I was kind of assigned to him. So every week we would go, and if it was a nice day, we'd sit out in the courtyard and just chat. And he was telling me about different cars that he had and engines. And he got started on a time that he and his friend rented a Volkswagen bus. And they decided to do an impromptu camping trip to Pikes Peak. And this man goes into a detailed story like what you might see a witness encounter on a video or something, about seeing this Sasquatch on Pikes Peak 2 nights in a row. He told me this story, detail. And we're talking about a man that can't create a story at this point in his life. His brain function is not there to create a story.
Right.
He can regurgitate some memories, but he couldn't tell you, he couldn't make up a lie about what he had for lunch. It just wasn't there cognitively. But this story about Pikes Peak, he told it to me two different times, same exact story. I did have one person say that maybe he was recounting a movie that he watched.
Mm-hmm.
Possible. That's possible. But that movie would have had to have been pretty traumatic for him, for it to imprint in his brain on a level that he could bring it back up years later in such a diminished state. It was just interesting. There's certain things that stick with you. And this guy had an encounter on Pikes Peak to the point that it was still fresh in his memory through the dementia, through the fog. He was fascinated by it. He was terrified. He said, I'll never go back out in the woods again.
So without telling his story, can you tell me what he said that he saw there?
So they set up camp. Like I said, it was an impromptu thing. So they kind of they grabbed a tent and little things they thought they were going to need for the weekend. They go to their spot up on the mountain at Pikes Peak, and the first night what they saw, it was like off in the distance, and he said it looked like a person who was working firewood, picking up logs, chucking them over like into a stack, kind of thing. It was clearly aware of them, clearly wanted them to know it was there, but it didn't engage them that first night. They got spooked. They slept in the bus, the little Volkswagen bus, and I guess when they went into the bus, they didn't hear or see anything else that night. The second night, they're still there. I guess the way he understood it, the Bigfoot wanted them to leave. So when they were still there the second night, they hadn't left, it got frustrated, aggressive, made some howls, was much closer to their camp. Didn't attack them or anything like that, but it was aggressive to the point they decided, you know what, we're leaving. And they left. He said that it was a brownish color. It was tall, long arms. And I go back to the way he was describing it, throwing the wood almost like you would think of like a chimpanzee kind of bent over with the bent arms, kind of chucking wood like you're going to pile it up. But he said it wasn't going to a pile, it was just going.
Yeah.
He was just making motions. We were talking earlier about throwing the 60-pound rocks.
Right.
And I think that was a display of strength.
Right.
But he was at a distance that you couldn't really tell how big these logs are. And they weren't going to go look.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
yeah, that was pretty much the extent of it. That was another thing that made it believable. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't this Bigfoot was banging on our, whatever. Nope. They saw it. They saw it twice. They heard it. They knew that it was trying to intimidate them, and they left.
Bill, you were showing me a video a minute ago about Sasquatch and her baby. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So from what I understand, the guy puts out a trail cam, and I don't even know that the guy was looking for Bigfoot, to be honest. I think he had an apple tree, and he had the trail cam near the apple tree, and he spotted a coyote. And then in the next frame, you see the coyote, and we were talking about how visibly spooked this coyote was. Large coyote, too. Hair up on the back of its neck, tail clearly tucked between its back legs, just scooting out of there as fast as it could. And then the next thing you see is this very weird, what they might call a blob squatch. It's a fuzzy something, but when you break it down, you can tell it looks like a female Sasquatch with a baby, or a young one under her. Eating the apples. They recreated it with a guy who's quite big, and once you have that perspective to see the size of it, I don't know what else it could have been.
I don't either. How tall is Bobo?
6'4".
6'4", thereabouts. I knew
I think
it's well over 6 feet.
Yeah, 6'4", 6'5". He's a big guy.
And he's been over, and they showed a picture of him, and the way that I got a perspective of it was I could see the foliage behind him of the same tree, and the foliage was smaller, and he was larger.
Yep.
All right, so then they showed the foliage of the creature, whatever it was, and the foliage was closer, and the creature was massively bigger than what the foliage was. The perspective, the way that I saw it, looked like that creature was a good half again his size of Bobo himself, which is a pretty big fella.
When they did the comparison, what I was expecting to look for was the definition of the two people, trying to figure out where's the head, where's the hips, where's the legs. But then when the comparison comes up, that's already clear. You're like, oh, I see where it is.
Yeah.
And then you're taken by the size.
Right.
It's huge.
I was having a little difficulty seeing the picture at first. I mean, I could see the picture, but I was having a hard time identifying what I was seeing for the first 2 or 3 times that I saw it. Then suddenly it came into focus. I could see the right leg, knee, and calf of this creature kind of cocked out to one side a little bit, and that's when I realized this was a 2-legged creature. That leg was long with the knee that bends backwards. A bear's knee bends forward on the back, and so it could not have been a bear just by that alone.
When you look at that image, I think what happens when you first look at it is your mind tries to see a 4-legged creature.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're used to seeing. It's either a person or it's a 4-legged creature. When your perspective shifts to realize this is bipedal, it makes sense, but it's harder to comprehend.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. And it almost had me thinking there for a minute that they were talking about a bear, until I got a good look at that leg. Then I realized, no, I was wrong. It definitely was not a bear. And sometimes it's hard for me to get focused on things visually. But, you know, they have these stereograms, I think they call them, and I get them on the internet all the time. and you look at them a certain way, and they're 3D pictures, and then all you see is a bunch of squigglies or dots or something, some kind of blotches, and you look at them a certain way, and then all of a sudden an image will come into view. So I've learned how to do that, get my eyes to cooperate with that. And I've also noticed that, like so many scientists have said, well, we're so trained, ingrained, and evolutionarily speaking, to see faces that we automatically look for faces, and we see faces in things that are not really faces.
Pareidolia.
And I agree. Yeah, that can take place. I noticed a little dirty spot on the floor while I was sitting there, and I thought, I just kind of let my mind wander a little bit, and my focus kind of went out. And when it did, the little dirty spot shifted enough to where it looked like a rough sketch of a face. Okay, It didn't look like a real face, but a rough sketch of one. And I've done that over the years and stuff. So I've learned to identify when I'm seeing something out of context or something real. And these videos sometimes leave you in a quandary of how to determine what you're really seeing.
Yeah.
Like the one with the tree that had the gap in it, and I saw a creature there. It looked like it was implanted, photoshopped in. And of course, part of the reason it looked photoshopped might have been the fact that they had it outlined in the picture so that you could identify it. But on the flip side of that, they said they had one arm looked bigger than the other one. But in all fairness, that left arm, which looked bigger, was pointed towards the front, towards the camera. And the other one, with the shoulders turned partly to the right, was back to the rear, which is going to throw a different perspective on those. And I'm a bit of an artist. I draw pretty well, so I could see the difference in the arms, and that would be justified just for position only.
Yeah.
Okay, so
a forced perspective kind of situation.
Yeah, so you can't just say that was fake. I mean, I thought it might be photoshopped, but in all fairness, it might have just been my perception of that when I looked at it.
I think there's a factor too with Bigfoot. We're right-handed. We're left-handed. Mm-hmm. We're one side dominant. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be.
Right.
So if this particular Bigfoot likes to climb trees and hang from its left arm, that left arm is going to be a little bigger than the right arm. Not drastically, but I think when we start talking about people who are critical of a lot of the videos, we both know a lot of the videos out there are junk.
Oh yeah,
a lot of them are junk, and that's okay.
Quite a few.
It's fun. It only takes one.
Yeah.
It only takes one to be real. And I think the people who are critical of them are so critical that they break it down to the most simple. Just like we said, it's a monkey or an ape, or
right.
It can do this, therefore it's not. They break it down into such a simple cynicism that it doesn't really.
True.
It doesn't. They're cynical. I'm sorry, not cynical. They are critical just for the sake of being skeptical. There's no science behind what they're saying. They're just saying that it doesn't work.
It doesn't exist, so it can't be.
Right, exactly.
And in their mind, they've already made up for it, no matter what they see.
Right.
And it's like several things in life, until I've seen it and experienced it and touched it, I couldn't believe that it was real. But going back to some of Todd Standing's videos, I remember one where he had set some apples out on a log, and then the apples kept disappearing, and I thought, well, okay, big deal. It could have been anything getting those apples. until he showed a blow up of that scene, and you could see a hand reaching up over the log, grasping the apple and pulling it away. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah, well, it wasn't a possum or a dog or.
And the log was up fairly high?
No, the log was at about 2 feet off the ground. So that means that the thing crawled up to it,
right,
and reached up over it and got that. Because he was talking about how the thing was there inaudible. You could hear it, but you couldn't see it because it was staying hidden. And then he had another video of one where he said foolishly followed it in the dark. Now, you're not going to get me to follow anything in the dark. That's just a dangerous thing to do. And he realized that, and he stopped. And he had infrared camera, and he filmed this tree, this area in the tree, just beyond the tree, like inches beyond the tree. There was a softer area than the area around it that was all black. And I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, well, what is that? I can't see what that is for sure, until he showed the clip a few minutes later, another clip of the same spot a few minutes later, when you could see nothing but the black of the night in that empty spot where that softer gray area was. Then he showed the same one, the first one again, and then I'm going like, oh my God, you can actually see the shoulders on this thing. And it was huge, monstrously huge. And he then went to the same spot, and he said, I believe he was 6'2", and about 260, I think, thereabouts, himself.
That's a big guy.
Yeah, pretty big fella. So he's in that same area and got the film going, and he goes up to that same bare spot in the tree, and he reaches up, and he's only reaching about a third of the way up the body view of where the creature was, and he jumped up, and he was not able to jump up as high as the whole creature. So he still hadn't reached the top of its head.
Wow.
And it was just like, whoa, dude. I mean, this guy it was huge. It was right there. You had to look at it twice to see it, but then infrared oftentimes is like that. It's like night cam's what it was. But, the military version nowadays, it was weird when they first came out because everything looked green. But now the technology has improved so much that it's almost looking like dusk time, and you're seeing it with a certain amount of real light, or natural light, that is. And his obviously isn't that high grade, and it was lower quality, but still, you could still see things, and you could see, as he showed around, he could show things laying on the ground, his campfire, his cooking utensil or pot, one or the other. I can't remember now what it was. But you could see all that stuff in good detail.
Wow.
So it was good enough to see that, so why couldn't it be good enough to see the other thing is my point.
Yeah. Do you think that Sasquatch is able to see the IR light from trail cams and things like that?
I would think that they would be able to, because they travel around at night.
They're nocturnal.
And they're largely nocturnal. And according to all evidence, they seem to be anyways. So, yeah, I would think so, because other critters seem to be able to see that.
Yeah. I think either or both, they can sense or see the IR, so they know to stay away from the trail cameras. And I think possibly they could even hear, something inside those cameras that's clicking or whatever.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean they're seen every now and then. A lot of people make the case there's so many trail cams out there. If there was something, we'd have it on camera. Well, not if they can see the camera.
Exactly.
There are, we lose certain frequencies in our hearing over time. I didn't realize how drastic this was. My wife's a lot younger than me, and we were listening to this ringtone. I guess these kids use ringtones in school because it's at a pitch that the teachers can't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily believe that, so I started playing these ringtones on my phone. I couldn't hear anything. I thought my volume was down. My wife, with her young ears, will you turn that off? What is that annoying noise? I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
And now that she's, we've been together for 13 years, she can't hear the sound now.
Right.
My kids can.
Yeah.
That tells us right there, there's plenty going on, and it was loud to her. So there's plenty going on out there that is audible, but we can't hear it.
Yeah.
Just like I'm sure there's things that are visual that we can't see. So,
yeah.
I don't want to get into too much woo here, but I've always dipped my toe in the woo a little bit. People say maybe Bigfoot is interdimensional. I don't know if it is or not, but perhaps something with the frequency or wherever a Bigfoot lives. I personally believe a Bigfoot is flesh and blood,
Mm-hmm.
But for the sake of what we're doing here,
Yeah.
if it were interdimensional, if it were something that could shift, that would explain why the videos are never clear.
Exactly.
They're constantly in a state of higher frequency than what we can see. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just, hypothetically.
Well, now let's do a quick comparison. A Bigfoot is described as large, hairy, humanoid, bipedal creature, primate that looks human in a way. All right. Now that's pretty much the only description you get about him.
Mm-hmm.
How many descriptions do you get for chupacabra? Well, it looks like a goat, looks like a coyote, looks like a There's about 20 different descriptions that you
They're
get for
gray,
chupacabra.
they're brown, they're black, they're large, they're small.
Yeah, and they do different things, and the word chupacabra, I think, is
Goat sucker.
Spanish for goat sucker, and so the whole thing is that I'm not so much buying into the chupacabra as far as all of the reports, anyways. I believe that there might be something to the thing, but not to all that they talk about the thing, because it just seems like too wide a variety.
Sure. But based on something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like the Bigfoot, so many different variations, but it's based on something, and it only takes one bit of one of those variations to be accurate to make it real.
Yeah, and another thing, too, this was on a video. They did collected hair and different things. And one of the things that they did, they collected hair, and they proved it was a yak one time, and another time it was something else, and another time it was a bear. And then a couple of times they said, well, this DNA was so close to human-like that it had to be contaminated. Okay? Now, the reality of it is they may be right. It might be contaminated with human DNA. But if the people that collected were careful enough, it wouldn't be. And then the proposal is that Bigfoot is a branch of humans. Why wouldn't its DNA be almost human-like?
Makes sense to me.
So you can't throw it out because of that. And yet they do.
Yeah.
They throw it, with the flimsiest of excuses they throw to any kind of evidence out and deny it. Another video that I saw where people said they had a Bigfoot body and had it in a freezer.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to love this one, folks. And Bill's going like, yeah, I saw this too, And but anyways, they had this freezer with a Bigfoot body in it. And it was full of ice, water, I guess, and froze over it. They thawed the rascal out and got him out, and it was some kind of a suit, and there wasn't even any organic material in it. It was fake as a $3 bill.
A rubber suit.
Yeah, is that what it was, a rubber suit? I knew it wasn't real anyways. And so with that in mind, people are going to say, I told you, see, it was all a hoax. There's no such thing as Bigfoot. Well, shucks.
What do you think was the end goal with that? Do you think, obviously he didn't think he was going to fool anybody in the long run. Was he trying to make the Bigfoot people look silly, or was he just trying to get attention? What do you think?
Both of those.
Both of those?
Yeah, I think myself, that's what I think. He was trying to make the believers look silly and get some attention in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, faking videos and things like that, and some of it is so obviously fake, and some of it looks so potentially real. And then you get those who have diligently done their homework and did things completely in the open and honest, and they're being decried because of what this other idiot did to get attention. Or other idiots, there's not just one. Quite a few of them, it seems like.
There's quite a few of those things running around. Idiots, that is.
But like they say of the UFOs, just to throw this out there, they say, the Air Force says that out of 100 sightings, all right, they can prove something like 90% of those, 95% of those are explainable by something. Swamp gas.
That's a good one.
A
lot of swamp gas.
Yeah. But even if it is, some of them could actually be swamp gas.
Sure.
Okay, there's no question about that. Could be. But there's also the 2 to 5% that's left over that they cannot disprove. And if you take the 10,000 sightings and you only use 2% of them, what's that? That's at least 100 UFOs that are potentially real.
And it only takes one.
And it only takes one. And the same thing with Bigfoot. If any of the evidence is real, and there's tons and tons and tons of evidence, video, footprints, and sightings and personal contact, I hope to find out one of these days that Bigfoot is real. And this is Cecil and Bill signing off.
Have a good one. Stay squatchy.